Now, this, again, we're talking about the American Revolutionary War. What caused it? Now, if this were a course in American history, we would spend a whole period talking about the causes, a whole period talking about the war, and a whole period talking about rebuilding the nation. 3 periods. It is a very important time in American history. We're going to probably spend about 20 minutes on all 3 or less. Essentially, now folk, what happened, of course, to make a long story short, the 13 colonies rebelled, and after a 7-year war, to the surprise of everyone, the 13 colonies won. How did the 13 disorganized colonies defeat their mother country? Well, several things went wrong in Britain. Number one, Britain found itself fighting a war with Spain. Spain would not help the colonials. Spain said, oh no, if these people get their independence, they'll start trying to steal Florida and New Mexico from us. And guess what? They were right. When the Americans became independent, they did take Florida. Of course, we bought Florida, but we stole New Mexico and Texas and a whole lot of other places. Actually, now I want to clarify, we didn't steal it from Spain, we stole it from Mexico. Mexico became independent. Then we came in and took these places. But anyway, there's an old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So when Spain started fighting Great Britain, it meant that Great Britain had to divert its resources to fight Spain. And in addition to that, Holland, which at that time was a big, powerful European country, Holland and Russia were both threatening to fight Britain. Britain was finding itself fighting Spain already. Then France joined in. France actually helped us out. France joined in, so Britain was fighting the colonies, Spain, France, and threatening to be fighting Holland and Russia. They couldn't handle it all. Now, cause of the war, you might have heard the cause was taxes. And that is a big issue. It was a big issue. The British were imposing taxes on the colonials, and the colonials had no representatives in Parliament. The idea of taxation by representation was 400 years old. It went all the way back to the 1300s. Essentially, what the war was about, it was telling the colonials telling the people of Great Britain, hey, you need to treat us with respect like you've been treated for hundreds of years. All right, again, the law about taxation was about 400 years old. No taxation without representation. There were other issues. The king was sending judges and telling our judges, move aside, step aside, we'll judge you. The king was dismissing colonial legislatures as being rebellious. The new legislatures have no validity. The king was also sending his governors to replace our governors that we had elected. In addition, there were people being put in prison and taken to England to be tried for treason, away from their family and friends. English were also knocking on American doors and saying, I've got 2 men here who need a place to stay, you keep them. Hoarding of troops without consent of the owner. Forcing owner. And also the British were, if they decided they wanted to search a home, they'd barge in any time of the day or night, search the home to find any evidence of rebellion, any evidence of tax-free items, tax-free tea. All this, the Americans said, you're not allowed to do that in Great Britain. How come you're doing it here? The British said, well, in effect, free on you, we're going to keep on. Now, I had a student do a paper, though, which said that the real reason, and I can understand it, I don't think the real reason is taxation. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, which is in the back of almost every American history book, the taxation issue is like number 17 on the list. And it's just a side issue, not even really important. The important issues were he has dissolved our legislatures, he has taken our men to prison without trial, he has appointed governors over us without our consent. I mean, all this stuff, he has quartered troops in our homes, he has unlawfully searched our homes without the consent of the owner, without a warrant, all these grievances. But somebody said the real grievance, folks, consisted of what constituted money. In the colonies, there was very little silver and gold coins, very few silver and gold coins. So how did the colonies get rich? the colonials began to issue paper money. First, wealthy people would pay the workers in IOUs. Here, now, I don't have any money to pay you with, but take this IOU and go to the local store, and the owner there, I'm in cahoots with him, he'll give you what you want with these IOUs. So these workers would use IOUs as their pay, and it worked. In addition, they started issuing banknotes. A bank would issue paper money, then governments, state governments started issuing paper money. And the British, in effect, were upset and said, hey, money should be gold and silver coins. And the American colonials were getting wealthy. So the British, when they passed their tax laws, they said that all the taxes must be paid in gold and silver coins. The problem was there were very few gold and silver coins in the colonies. And the colonies said, we just can't afford that. We can't afford to get rid of what little silver and gold we have. So the issue might have been what constituted money. And the colonies was paper. Paper money made the colonials rich. In Britain, they were using gold and silver coins, and the result was there weren't enough to go around. Anyway, two men I want you to remember. I mean, if you've taken American history, you should know these men already. These men are George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, now, Thomas Jefferson, he's the one who, he became a president later. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. I'm tempted to ask for a show of hands, but I'm not going to do it. About how many of you have heard of these men, but I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. Hopefully all of you have heard of these men at one point or another. Now, I had a young woman come up to me, and she was an American woman, and said, Mr. Cohn, I'm having a hard time finding 4-page material to write a paper about. I said, well, what are you writing about? And she said, George Washington. And I had to almost pinch myself to keep from laughing out loud. I mean, if she couldn't find enough material on 4 pages about him, and I don't know what. But anyway, anyway, George Washington was the military leader who led the colonials in the rebellion. Thomas Jefferson, he wound up being ambassador to France to help convince the French king to come on our side. There are others. I mean, there's Ben Franklin, who also was with Thomas Jefferson to help. I mean, again, if you study American history, but we'll not talk about Ben Franklin for now. I mean, I've thrown a lot of names at you, but these two are like the main ones.